The following program is a production of Naleo TV.
Contested case hearing for the 30-meter telescope project. A proceeding for the State of Hawaii, DLNR, Board of Land and Natural Resources.
Ask for appearances, please.
Morning, Your Honor. Tim Louis Kwan and Ian Sanderson on behalf of the applicant, University of Hawaii at Hilo.
Good morning.
Good morning, Your Honor. Deborah Ward.
Good morning, Ms. Ward.
Good morning, Kealoha Pishoda for Kealoha Pishoda, Mauna Kea Nainoho, and Paul Nevis. And here with Mauna Kea Nainoho is also Keo Mailani Von Go.
All right, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Clarence Kukawakahi Cheng, President.
Good morning, Mr. Ching.
Good morning, Harry Ferguson.
Welcome back, Mr. Ferguson. We missed you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, glad to see you're well.
Kakahiakano, E. Kalani Flores, representing the Flores case Ohana.
Thank you. Good morning.
I just want to mention that I might have to leave earlier and around before 3 or so today, so I just want to make note of that.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Flores.
Good morning, Your Honor. Ross Shinam on behalf of TMT International Observatory.
Good morning, Mr. Shinama.
Good morning, Your Honor. Lincoln Ashida representing Pueo.
Good morning, Mr. Ashida.
Kaliko Lehua Kanaile representing me.
We missed you too. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Good morning, Your Honor. Dexter Kayama on behalf of Kaya. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Kayama.
Aloha, Lanny Sinkin on behalf of the Temple of Lono.
Good morning, Mr. Sinkin.
Good morning, Mehana Kihoe.
Good morning, Ms. Kihoe.
If it's okay, I have a statement from Lena Ala, Slight Home. Her husband was struck by a car last night, and she's on Oahu right now. Sorry, I'm trying to find what she wanted me to say. Okay, here it is. So on behalf of Lena Ala Slight Home, Aloha Kako, I will be unable to attend any hearings indefinitely. My husband was the victim of a pedestrian versus motor vehicle accident on December 11, 2016, and we are currently at Queens Medical Center awaiting surgeries. I don't know if this is the appropriate manner in which to request this, but I would request to have the ability to cross-examine witnesses at a later date if the hearings officer allows. As more information on his status is made available on me, I will advise. Ikapiko kaulana o ka'aina, Lena Ala Slight Home. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Kihoe.
Aloha, Cindy Freitas, and Billy won't be coming today, William Freitas.
Good morning, Ms. Freitas.
Morning, Dwight Vicente.
Good morning, Mr. Vicente. Okay. CM Kanuha. CM Kanuha. No response, not present. Joseph Kamara. Joseph Kamara. Not present. And we'll note that Lena Slightholm is absent. Mailani Lee. I think Ms. Lee, did she submit a withdrawal? Okay. We'll note that she has withdrawn. And I think in the withdrawal, she may have asked that she be taken off the certificate of service so she doesn't need to receive all of the things that we file. Stephanie Tabata. Stephanie Tabata, not present. Tiffany Kakalia. Tiffany Kakalia, on her way. Glenn Keela. Glenn Keela, not present. Brannon Kealoha. Brannon Kealoha, not present. And we don't see Ms. Holy here this morning, but she may come a little later, I think. I'm sure she'll be here. Okay, this, I'd like to call for, is there a Shelley Stevens? Oh, good, Ms. Stevens. We're going to take up your motion at this time. So you submitted a motion that is in our documents library at document number is 414. And there was an opposition filed by the university. And I'd like to give you a chance to speak to your motion at this point. We've been actually in the hearing for quite a number of months, having gone through all the pretrial motions, which were considerable, having hearings on those motions in August. I think we had 3 days of hearings. And now we're in our 14th day of actual taking evidence. So there's a lot of material that has passed under the bridge already. And my thinking is that, you know, you're not going to be able to catch up, that's for sure. We can't go backwards. But more importantly, perhaps for everyone here, it will be difficult to add you in at this point. And I think you know already, because we addressed you before, that your earlier letter in May or June went into correspondence, and nowhere in that letter does it indicate you desire to be a party. So when you contacted the department in August indicating a desire, I think they submitted your request, and then we called your name. When we brought the motion up for a hearing, and you indicated later that you elected to attend a police commission meeting rather than to attend the hearing.
Yes, ma'am.
And so now you have filed a motion, and we have to deal with the motion. But in light of all of that, I would like to hear your very brief comments.
Yes, Your Honor. I did file a motion to try to ensure that I could at least submit information having to do with lease violations and compliance to laws and statutes protecting Native Hawaiians and their water rights, and also that the CUD, the permit in the conservation zone under number 25, there's certain compliance that they're supposed to have had all this time. And so there's other things of protection of registered and non-registered cultural sites. And if I don't want to take up any more time. I know that it's been going on for a while, years. But I would like to say that at that time I could not attend the numerous hearings, and I didn't have any notice of where they were going to be, or else I would have tried even if I had a cast on my arm. But yes, I did submit. I was actually asked by a Native Hawaiian to submit a letter that would be postmarked on the 29th. And because of my interest and research and whatnot in cultural resource management, and I have training in at the University of Hawaii in cultural resource management under Dr. Peter Mills. So I'm also very interested in the the particular laws and statutes, and so I would say that I would feel comfortable with if I could be added at the end, and I would limit my questioning to 10 or 15 minutes.
Ma'am, you're not going to be able to do any of that unless you're a party.
Yes, ma'am, I know. So that's why I made a motion to ensure, because when I was in Oahu, when I had to go to my surgery, I did go into the BLNR office to see what had happened because I didn't receive any notice. And they said they had filed my original under communications.
Because your original document does not indicate anywhere in that document that you wish to be a party, or we would have considered it some kind of a motion.
I guess the only indication that I did put would be the RE at the top, which I had, learned under the science and technology report writing that sort of sums it all up. And so under the RE, I put the TMT contested case hearing, and I put my comments. But I did not use the word that I wanted to intervene, or maybe other words I should have used. But basically, that was the final day to submit to be a party to the case. But I physically could not, because I ended up having 2 broken wrists. I had surgery and the police commission hearing had been scheduled, I think, from 2-3 months in advance. So I was hoping to be able to attend, but I had to be there all day to wait for my turn.
When was your surgery?
Well, I was going to say, Your Honor, if you'd like, I can bring in my medical files and show you all the different things that had happened.
If you can just tell me when your surgery was, that would help.
Okay. Let's see, I went to the police commissioner meeting. My surgery was after that, although I cannot remember the exact date, but it was after that. I had to go to Honolulu.
You don't remember the month?
Well, I had it was in September, I believe. I'd have to go look. I didn't bring that information with me, but like I said, I could get that if you want, and provide my medical information to you if you need proof of.
I'm just trying to make a note of where your surgery was in the time frame that we're talking about. That's all. So if you think it was September, I'll accept that.
Okay.
All right. Anything else? You saw the university's objection.
Yes.
Would you like to comment on that?
Oh, well, no. I saw their original objection that they had sent me some time ago, and so I felt that the University of Hawaii, because they are leasing the property, that there were certain things that they were not doing so far as consultation and so far as the Native Hawaiians' site identity and cultural property. And so I think that there needed to be more of a balance, and I would like to be able to, as a party to the case, but in brief, I don't mind, as I stated, a reduced amount of time or as the hearing officer sees fit.
Thank you. Mr. Louis Kwan or Mr. Sanderson? And just for the record, this is document number 420, and that would be the opposition to Ms. Stevens' motion to be a party.
Your Honor, we filed an opposition to Ms. Stevens' motion. I think it covers the period in which I believe her letter was sent in, as well as the pre-hearing conferences that were held following that. And between the time for the cutoff for parties' admission back in early June and I think it was August 29th, we had 4 pre-hearing conferences by that time. And I believe the motion was heard on August 29th before Ms. Stevens' surgery. You know, we understand, I've heard her reasons for not being able to participate, but again, we believe that unfortunately it really is way untimely. And if you look at even the discretionary admission of parties under HAR 13-5-31C.
I think it's 13-1.
13-1, correct, -31C. The admissions of additional parties that will not add substantially new relevant information or will make the proceedings inefficient and unmanageable apply in this case. All of the issues that Ms. Stevens described just now are covered already by the existing parties in this case. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. We're going to deny the motion to join as a party as, first of all, it wouldn't meet the criteria in 13-1-31C, particularly at this time. Well, Mr. Kanaile, did you want to say something?
I'd like to make a motion in favor of her being part of this. We have TIO, we have a lot of people that is redundant in here anyway.
You have who?
Like TIO, university, we have a lot of people that are saying the same thing too. So I think she has a little bit more research experience than she should be put in here with us. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Kanaile. And we'll note that you are in favor of, speak in favor of Ms. Stevens. Nonetheless, I am going to stand by my original thought, which is that her motion is untimely for one thing. Most importantly, it does not meet the requirements for admission under 13-1-31C at this time. By this time we have a number of points that have convinced me that the interest that she currently propounds is the same as at least others who are already admitted to the proceeding, and there are 19 or so, quite a number. And I do not believe that the addition of Ms. Stevens as a party at this time will add substantially to information or add or her addition will also make the proceedings at this point inefficient and unmanageable. Thank you very much, Ms. Stevens. We're done.
So you're reading that directly from their request?
Actually, from 13-1-31C.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to appeal and take one more minute of your time, because
Ma'am, you're taking everybody's time at this point, and you're not a party, so I need to be done with this.
But I could catch up on the Leo television because I have been following the information. And I am trained in cultural resource management.
I hear you. Thank you.
Well,
We'll note
thank
the
you
appearance
anyway.
of Mrs. Holy this morning at 9:13. Good morning. And did anyone else appear? Oh, good morning, Ms. Kakalia. Nice to see you too. Did you come in around the same time as Mrs. Holy? Just before, so let's make that 9:12. Okay. Good morning.
Good morning. Joseph Kamara is not able to be here because of his work schedule. My name is
who are you?
Leilani Lindsay Kaapuni. I'm his mother, and I'm
sorry?
taking
can I-
Leilani Lindsay Kaapuni, and I will be taking minutes for him.
Oh, so you're late, Ms. Lindsay, and you are
His mother,
Mr.
Kamara's
mother.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lindsay, for telling us that. Good morning, Mr. Sinkin.
Good morning. I will note the appearance of Kahuna Frank Nobriga with the Temple of Lono today.
Good morning. And Mr. Sinkin, perfect timing, because I think you're next up. So we have with us, I think, Stephanie Nagata on the witness chair now. And Ms. Nagata, may I ask you to please raise your right hand and take the oath? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in the matters before this tribunal shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And we're going to continue with the cross-examination. It was Mr. Sinkin's turn. And just for the record, I think Mr. Fergestrom and Mr. Kanaile were not present when Ms. Nagata began testifying last week. However, we're not done with the cross-examination, so at the end of the last person, I think that would be probably Mrs. Freitas today. We'll give you folks an opportunity to ask questions as well. Okay, good morning.
Good morning. In the interest of time, I have a set of documents that I'm going to be going over with Ms. Nagata, so I've prepared a little package of those documents to start with.
Great.
And everybody, I think, should have them.
Thank you, Mr. Sinkin.
And, Your Honor, I have marked these documents with exhibit numbers that follow in our order on the Temple of Lono exhibits.
Okay.
So the first document is Exhibit L16, and it is the agenda for the meeting of the Office of Mauna Kea Management Board held on Tuesday, October 4th, 2016.
All right, thank you.
Good morning, Ms. Nagata.
Good morning.
So the first document, Exhibit L16, is that the agenda for the meeting of the Mauna Kea Management Board on November 4th, 2016?
Yes, it is.
I'm sorry.
Yes, it is.
October 4th. Excuse me. October 4th, 2016. Are you on? Yes, you are. Good. Did you prepare this agenda?
Yes, I did.
And did you attend the board meeting?
Yes, I did.
So, Your Honor, based on the fact that she prepared this agenda and attended the meeting, I'd like to move this document into evidence.
Any objections by the university?
I believe we're admitting evidence at the end of the case. So I'm not sure what the procedure is here for admissions now, but I have no trouble with Mr. Sinkin cross-examining the witness with this.
Yes, I'm going to accept that as foundation for examination of this witness of this document. And at the end of all of the testimonies, I'd like to consider at that point the receipt of exhibits and evidence.
I understand that's the procedure you've established. I'm a little nervous about it, and I'm not sure if it's going to work at the very end, so I wanted to be sure these were in the record just in case it didn't work.
Oh,
but I'll proceed.
Thank you.
Ms. Nagata, the next document, marked as L17, states that it is the Mauna Kea Comprehensive Management Plan Action CR-5. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
And is that the backup material for item 6B on the agenda? Roman numeral 6B.
Yes, it is.
And did you prepare that document?
Yes, the office prepared it.
The office prepared it under your supervision?
Correct.
And that document was on the agenda for that meeting?
That's correct.
Okay. The next document is Exhibit L18, It's a Mauna Kea Comprehensive Management Plan Action Item CR7. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
And is that document prepared by you or under your supervision?
It's a copy of it, yes.
A copy of it, yes. And was that the backup material for item CR7 on the agenda that we discussed earlier?
Yes, it is.
Item L19, Mauna Kea Comprehensive Management Plan Action Item CR-8. Was that prepared by you or under your supervision?
Yes, it is.
And is that the backup material for item CR8 on the agenda that we discussed?
Yes, it is.
And item L20 is titled Mauna Kea Comprehensive Management Action Plan, Mauna Kea Comprehensive Management Plan Action CR-9. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
And was that prepared under your supervision?
Yes, it is.
And is that the backup material for item CR9 on the agenda we discussed?
Yes.
Thank you. Going back to Exhibit L17, the backup material for agenda item CR5. On page 1 of that document, the provisions of Article 12, Section 7 of the Hawaii State Constitution are set out. Do you see that?
I do.
And following that recitation of the constitutional provision, the following sentence appears. While traditional and cultural rights are recognized as an important aspect of our political heritage, the Hawaii State Constitution also tasks the state with the regulation of these rights. Do you see that sentence?
I do.
Did you write that sentence?
I did not write this sentence, but I personally did not write that sentence.
Is this the policy of the Office of Mauna Kea Management?
I believe it is just a rephrasing of what the Constitution says.
A rephrasing of the constitutional provision. The constitutional provision states that the state of Hawaii reaffirms and shall protect all rights customarily and traditionally exercised for subsistence, cultural, and religious purposes by descendants of the original Hawaiians. Do you believe that Article 12, Section 7, creates an affirmative obligation on the part of the state of Hawaii to protect traditional and customary rights of Native Hawaiians, including spiritual rights?
I would object to, if it's asking this witness for a legal conclusion or opinion, I would object to that.
I'm going to start with the fact that the witness has expressed her opinion that this is the constitutional provision applies to what they do, and she's provided her interpretation of what that provision means. I'm questioning her about that interpretation that she has put forward.
But not as a legal conclusion.
She's not a lawyer. You're not a lawyer, is that correct?
I am not a lawyer.
So I'm not asking her for a legal opinion.
I'm assuming that that's asking her for a personal opinion. Is that correct?
No, that is not correct, Your Honor. What I'm saying is we are here discussing the policies and practices of the Office of Mauna Kea Management. Part of those policies and practices are the implementation of Constitution, laws, regulations, all those things, and she has her understanding of what each of those is and how it applies to her agency. I'm testing that understanding.
So, Your Honor, I mean, the document speaks for itself.
I'm going to overrule the objection. Go ahead.
You remember the question?
No.
Okay, that's fine. Do you believe that Article 12, Section 7, creates an affirmative obligation on the part of the state of Hawaii to protect traditional and customary rights of Native Hawaiians, including spiritual rights?
Well, it says here that that the state affirms and shall protect all rights customarily and traditionally exercised for subsistence, cultural, and religious purposes. as possessed and possessed by Ahupua'a tenants who are descendants of Native Hawaiians who inhabited Hawaiian Islands prior to 1778, subject to the right of the state to regulate such rights.
That is what it says.
That's what it says.
My question is, do you believe that that provision creates an obligation, an affirmative obligation on the part of the state of Hawaii to protect traditional and customary rights?
It affirms the state's responsibility, but it also states that it is subject to regulation.
Right. So does the obligation created extend to the Office of Mauna Kea Management?
We are required to uphold all rules and regulations.
And as you noted, the constitutional provision also states that such rights are, quote, subject to the right of the state to regulate such rights, correct?
Correct.
Do you believe that Article 12, Section 7 imposes an obligation on the state of Hawaii to regulate the traditional and customary rights of Native Hawaiians?
I'm not sure how to answer that question.
Wait, let me try again. Do you believe that Article 12, Section 7 imposes an obligation on the state of Hawaii to regulate the traditional and customary rights of Native Hawaiians? Is there an obligation to regulate?
Are you asking, just a minute, are you asking her to speak for the entire state? Is that your question?
She's a state agency.
Well, I'm asking
so
you about your question.
whether the Constitution creates an obligation for the state government is what I'm asking, not everybody that lives in the state, the state government.
She can't speak for state government. She can speak for OMKM.
Well, then we'll do it that way.
Very good.
Do you believe that Article 12, Section 7 imposes an obligation on the Office of Mauna Kea Management to regulate the traditional and customary rights of Native Hawaiians?
I believe that the OMKM needs to consider the regulation of such rights.
They have an obligation to consider the regulation of such rights?
I don't think we are obligated, but we are to consider that.
Going back to Exhibit L17 and the statement appearing right after the constitutional provision, you state that, or the office states, that while traditional and cultural rights are recognized as an important aspect of our political heritage, the Hawaii State Constitution also tasks the state with the regulation of these rights. Do you believe that that constitutional provision compels you to do something to regulate these rights? I'm focusing on the word tasks. If something tasks you to do something, that creates an obligation on your part to do it. Are you saying that the Constitution of Hawaii tasks the Office of Mauna Kea Management with the regulation of traditional and customary rights of Native Hawaiians?
Excuse me, objection. It's misstating the phrase here. It doesn't say anything about Office of Mauna Kea Management. It's a task to state.
As an agency of the state, are you, I'm sorry.
We're asking him to repeat what he said because the court reporter couldn't hear.
Oh, I'm sorry.
My objection was that it's misstating what the phrase says. It says nothing about the Office of Mauna Kea Management. It actually reads, also tasks the state with the regulation of these rights. And if it's asking this witness for, whether or not the state is responsible for the regulation of these rights, I don't believe she's qualified to answer that.
Your Honor, this witness prepared or supervised the preparation of this document, which is an Office of Mauna Kea Management document that sets out what they believe to be the obligations of this agency under state law. So to say that we can't ask her about the obligations because it's under state law, not her law, flies in the face of what she's put in this document.
Okay, I'll overrule.
Thank you. So the question is, does the constitutional provision create an affirmative obligation on the Office of Mauna Kea Management to regulate the traditional and customary rights of Native Hawaiians?
Well, as I stated before, I think we can consider the regulation of such rights.
Okay. Would it be fair to say that the constitutional provision allows for and does not mandate regulation of those rights?
Objection again, asking for legal conclusion or opinion.
Sustained.
Your Honor, I'm going to distribute a copy of page 4-16 of Exhibit A-11. The Cultural Resources Management Plan is Exhibit A-11, and I'm distributing a copy of page 416 of that comprehensive Cultural Resources Management Plan.
Okay. Thank you.
Page 4-16. Exhibit A-11. Won't focus? If I'm correct, Michael, there's a focusing. Just trying to focus. That's worse.
I don't know how to work this machine. Sorry.
I think somewhere up on the top there was a focusing. There, okay. There, great. If you could just move that up so the whole table shows, table 4-7, that's what we're going to be talking about. Thank you. Thank you. On this document, do you see table 4-7?
Yes, I do.
The actions listed in table 4-7 refer to, quote, offerings on shrines and include, quote, food offerings shall be removed immediately following the ceremony. You see that?
Yes.
The basis for requiring the removal of food offerings immediately after the ceremony appears to be that leaving the offerings on the shrine after the ceremony can be, what it says here, a problem as they deteriorate or are dispersed by winds. You see that? It's in the top paragraph, or the second full paragraph, 4.2.1.3, offerings on shrines. There's a statement in that paragraph, the first paragraph of that section. Organic offerings become a problem as they deteriorate or are dispersed by winds. You see that now? You see that? Is that the basis for requiring the removal of offerings as soon as the offering ceremony is complete?
That's one of it, and also we have to consider invasive species, and that when you leave food offerings, it can invite or attract vermin such as rats or other such creatures, and that when organic material is left there, in place for a period of time, it does decompose, and it does provide a the decomposition can provide a nurturing mulch type thing for the for other invasive species to inhabit or thrive.
You've been in your position since the year, well, you've been with the Office of Mauna Kea Management since the beginning, in the year 2000, was it?
That's correct.
Right. Between the year 2000 and today, how many rats have been caught up on Mauna Kea? Any idea?
No, I don't recall any.
Do you recall any being caught?
No.
Thank you.
Excuse me, can you clarify when you say on Mauna Kea?
In the area under your jurisdiction?
Yes, there are, in the lower areas in Halepohaku, for example, there are mice, and there are mongoose, and there are rats.
At the 9,000-foot level?
That's correct.
Can you describe a typical offering ceremony?
No, I cannot.
Are you of Native Hawaiian ancestry?
No, I am not.
Okay, returning to document L17, which is the CR5 proposal. That refers to the culturally appropriate removal of offerings. Do you consider the making of offerings to be a cultural practice or a spiritual practice?
I couldn't say. I couldn't say. I don't know.
Upon what basis does the Cultural Resource Management Plan, its authors, or the Office of Mauna Kea Management conclude that it is culturally appropriate to require a spiritual practitioner to remove an offering from an altar immediately after completing the offering ceremony? I'm not referring to the impacts you were talking about. I'm talking about the action itself of requiring the ceremony to end with the removal of offerings immediately. On what basis does the Office of Mauna Kea Management put out that rule?
Having spoken to other members of the Hawaiian, within the Native Hawaiian community, some of them do remove it right away. Others feel that it should be removed within a period of time. But for us, it's a balance of those who wishing to offer, as well as a balance of us having to also take into consideration the protection of the natural resources.
So if the practice of the traditional faith was to place an offering on an altar and actually leave it there purposefully to deteriorate over time as an expression of appreciation for the life and death cycle that takes place on this planet, under what authority would the Office of Mauna Kea Management refuse to allow those offerings to remain on the altar?
Objection, argumentative.
No, I want to know what the authority is for this rule.
I'm going to overrule. Go ahead.
The authority comes from our lease and our obligation under the lease to comply with existing rules and regulations, and that we also have to consider the impacts that such offerings would have on the environment.
Are you obliged under the lease terms to require the removal of offerings at the end of a ceremony?
Not specifically.
Are you required under any existing rules and regulations to require the removal of offerings at the end of a ceremony?
Not specifically.
Item CR5, Exhibit L17, also calls for a, quote, culturally trained staff person or specially designated individual to be responsible for the culturally appropriate removal of offerings. What is meant by the term culturally trained staff person?
Well, it's my understanding that it would be someone who has some grounding in Native Hawaiian culture.
And when you say grounding, do you mean raised in that tradition or educated at the university or talked to a few people? What do you mean by grounded?
All of those.
What's that?
All of those.
All of those. And who will designate the individual responsible for such removals?
Well, it is cultural activities are, we would consult with individuals, for Kahukumana would be one, but we'd also would consult with individuals within our staff who are Native Hawaiian.
Well, this says that under item CR5, Exhibit L17, a culturally trained staff person or specially designated individual. My question was, who would designate that individual? And you're saying?
Within our office, we probably, among our staff, we would consult.
But who would actually do the designation?
There's, ultimately, it would be me.
That would be you. Thank you. Agenda CR5 item was a proposal. Is that correct? It has not actually been adopted.
Correct.
At the time that item appeared...
Can I just
sure.
clarify?
Absolutely.
It was a policy that was developed with in conjunction with Kahuku-Mauna. So it is basically their policy.
Is their policy as an adopted policy, a recommended policy, a suggested policy? What's the status of that?
It is their policy that we wanted to take to the Mauna Kea Management Board.
As a recommendation?
Yes.
As a recommendation. At the time that the item appeared on the October 4th, 2016 agenda, had the Mauna Kea Management Board previously voted to recommend the proposed actions in Table 4-7? Oh, which has disappeared, I'm sorry. You have it in front of you.
Sorry, could you repeat that, please?
Yes, at the time that this item appeared on the agenda, had the Mauna Kea Management Board previously voted to recommend the proposed actions in Table 4-7?
No.
Had the proposed actions been approved for implementation at any level of decision making?
Only with the Kahuku-Mauna Council.
Is it that they had come to a recommendation of that?
Yeah.
But on page 4-16, Exhibit A-11, under Management Actions, the first sentence says, the actions listed in Table 4-7 will be implemented. Who decided that the actions listed there would be implemented?
Well, it's taken from the Cultural Resources Management Plan, and this management plan was approved by the Board of Land and Natural Resources.
And the management plan had the items listed in Table 4-7?
If this is taken out of the approved cultural resource management plan, yes.
On page 6 of Exhibit L17, that's the CR5 item. Page 6 has the proposed policy on the placement and removal of offerings. And it's written in fairly generic terms, so I'm trying to understand the specific, how the specific actions we have discussed fit into the generic terms in the policy. So I want to walk through those just a little bit. Where it says the prohibition, let me see. On item 1 in the policy, offerings shall not be placed on existing historic properties, roadways, pathways, or existing structures or subleased properties. Does that prohibition apply to offerings on an altar or shrine already in place?
Objection. The document speaks for itself. It says what it says.
I'm going to overrule.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, what was that again?
Does the prohibition in item 1 of the proposed policy apply to offerings on an existing structure, an altar or a shrine already in place?
Yes.
Does the removal of offerings that present a health and safety issue, item 2, include the requirement to remove offerings as soon as the offering ceremony is completed?
It could be.
Do you find it at all ironic that within a conservation district, approval can be given to construct an 18-story building covering 5 acres within the district, while leaving a few tea leaves and fruit on an altar to deteriorate is prohibited?
Objection. Argumentative.
Definitely.
Then sustained.
Thank you. Exhibit L18 is item CR7 from the agenda and addresses the construction of new Hawaiian cultural features. What does the term new Hawaiian cultural features refer to?
It could be an ahu, a shrine, primarily those types of features.
An offering tower?
Well, I don't know what an offering tower looks like.
Okay. What's referred to as a lele?
Could be a lele, yes.
On page 1 of Exhibit L18, there's a lengthy quote from the Comprehensive Management Plan addressing CR7. And the beginning of that paragraph states that determining the appropriateness of constructing new Hawaiian cultural features is, quote, an extremely sensitive issue, as most native Hawaiians will be the first to say that it is not their kuleana to judge the cultural practices of another Hawaiian. Is it your understanding that native Hawaiian spiritual practices are primarily expressed within each family?
I'm sorry, are expressing what?
Expressed within each family, that these are family practices?
My understanding is that cultural practices are personal.
And is it your understanding that most native Hawaiians will be the first to say that it is not their kuleana to judge the cultural practices of another Hawaiian?
It is my understanding, yes.
The next sentence of that same paragraph states, quote, however, the intent of this management measure is to develop a process to determine culturally appropriate protocols. If Native Hawaiians do not judge the appropriateness of each other's spiritual practices, how can any protocols be established to judge the appropriateness of such spiritual practices?
Could you repeat that again?
If Native Hawaiians do not judge the appropriateness of each other's spiritual practices, how can any protocols be established to judge the appropriateness of those spiritual practices?
Objection, vague and ambiguous.
Ma'am, do you understand the question?
Well, when you say protocols,
Yes?
what do you mean by protocols?
I think I mean the same thing that it says in your document. On the second sentence of that paragraph, it says, however, the intent of this management measure is to develop a process to determine culturally appropriate protocols. What does that mean to you?
I see. What it means to me is that for the office, it is for, it was an it's not that we are telling individuals how to what your cultural practice is, and that was something Kahuku-Mauna was clear about. But it felt that there needed to be some kind of mechanism in place to one, to incorporate the rules and regulations that exist. And also they felt strongly that the cultural landscape needed to be protected. They didn't want to see copycat behavior occurring on the mountain, and also to protect the cultural practitioners if they were to build a cultural feature on the mountain, which we, if the office were aware of it and had come to the office to obtain a permit to do so.
The same paragraph states that, quote, Kahuku-Mauna and or the MKMB's Hawaiian Cultural Committee, in consultation with families with lineal and historic connections to Mauna Kea, Kupuna, cultural practitioners, the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and other Native Hawaiian groups will work in collaboration to develop these protocols. Who serves on the Mauna Kea Management Board's Hawaiian Cultural Committee?
The Hawaiian Cultural Committee had existed at one point in time, but it was decided that because we had Kahuku-Mauna, that it was not necessary to have a separate cultural committee because you could run into some conflict. So Kahuku-Mauna became the, remains as the cultural advisor.
So the Mauna Kea Management Board's Hawaiian Cultural Committee no longer exists?
That's correct.
Have families with lineage and historic connection to Mauna Kea been involved in drafting the protocols we're discussing this morning?
An attempt was made to contact, reach out to lineal descendants, but we were not, no one responded to our calls. But we do have someone in our office. We have two individuals in our office. One is a lineal descendant, and the other is a cultural descendant of Mauna Kea.
Have Kupuna been involved in drafting the protocols?
Well, it depends on, there are members on Kahuku-Mauna that could be considered Kupuna.
Have cultural practitioners been involved in drafting the protocols?
are some members on Kahokumauna that could be considered cultural practitioners.
Has the Office of Hawaiian Affairs been involved in drafting the protocols?
We had a consultation with the Office of Hawaiian Affairs.
And what was the nature of that consultation?
It was about an ahu, and it was the location of the building of such structures.
Was it about one particular ahu? That was the consultation?
It started off that way, yes.
And expanded to generally discuss locations for ahu?
It expanded into where, how and where would you put such structures, correct?
And did the staff of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs participate in that consultation?
Yes, they did.
Did any of the board trustees participate?
No.
And did the staff provide you with information on what they thought were appropriate, how and where to place cultural or spiritual shrines?
I don't exactly recall what they said. It was Kahokumauna had invited OHA members to come and to discuss the construction of cultural features.
Have any other Native Hawaiian groups been involved in drafting the protocols? Did you understand my question?
Yeah, I'm thinking.
You're thinking.
Sorry, it takes
that's
a
quite
while.
all right. That's quite all right. Any other Native Hawaiian groups?
Not that I can recall.
Okay. On page 2, under the management actions for constructing new shrines, item 2 states, quote, the Kahokumauna Council, in consultation with other Native Hawaiian organizations, will develop protocols that will consider which kinds of features and locations are appropriate or inappropriate and whether a review process is instituted. Has the Kahokumauna Council agreed to work on developing those protocols?
I'm sorry, where are you looking at?
On page 2 of Exhibit L18, item number 2 in the list of items under management actions for constructing new shrines. Do you see that?
Here.
Is that focused for everybody? Yeah, okay. So item 2 was the item that I read. The Kahokumauna Council, in consultation with other Native Hawaiian organizations, will develop protocols that will consider which kinds of features and locations are appropriate or inappropriate and whether a review process should be instituted. Has Kahokumauna Council agreed to develop those protocols?
This is part of their discussion in the development of CR 8. You see, I'm sorry, CR, what?
We're on CR7.
Sorry, CR7.
CR7.
Yes.
All right, turning to page 7 of that same document. The first full paragraph states that, quote, Kahokumauna agrees that it is not their kuleana to develop culturally appropriate protocols for constructing cultural features. That paragraph continues that, quote, protocols are personal and private in nature, and to develop a one-size-fits-all protocol is not appropriate, unquote. Do you agree that such protocols are personal and private in nature?
I believe cultural practices are personal in nature.
The protocols governing those practices are not personal in nature? All right, let me actually back up for a second. Can you distinguish for me in your mind between protocols and practices?
I think they can. It's, well, for my interpretation of protocols, it is how the Office of Mauna Kea Management would manage these kinds of activities. And cultural practices are those that are exercised by individuals.
So when in this document that we're looking at here, document L18, when it says that protocols are personal and private in nature, that's the opinion of the Kahuku Mauna Council, they're using the word protocols differently than you are?
It's my interpretation. Kahuku Mauna might have their own, yes.
Do you agree that such protocols are not subject to a, quote, one-size-fits-all protocol, unquote?
Possibly, yes.
That same paragraph continues that, quote, further to question a person's reasons for constructing a cultural feature may be viewed as niele, or not another person's business. As a non-practitioner of the traditional Hawaiian faith, would you expect Native Hawaiians to object to you attempting to set the protocols for their spiritual practices? What I'm getting at with this question is whether she would expect Native Hawaiians to accept her interpretation of protocols that govern their spiritual practices. Would she expect that?
What's in the mind of these Native Hawaiian practitioners?
Well, she's been visiting with them, it says here in her testimony.
But you're asking her to guess what's in their minds.
I'll move on. The paragraph continues. More importantly, the exercise of Native Hawaiian traditional and customary rights is constitutionally protected, subject to reasonable regulations as permitted by law. Kahuku Mauna does not have authority to regulate the traditional customary practices of other Native Hawaiians. That's the Kahuku Mauna's opinion of its own authority. So I want to summarize what we've just been through and ask you something here. What we've just reviewed is Native Hawaiian faith practices are a private and personal matter. Native Hawaiians do not consider it appropriate to judge the practices of other Native Hawaiians. There is no one-size-fits-all protocol questioning a person's reasons for constructing a spiritual feature is inappropriate, and there is no constitutional or legal basis for the Kahuku Mauna Council to regulate traditional Hawaiian spiritual practices. Given all of those realities, why is the Office of Mauna Kea Management still pursuing the effort to create such protocols?
The reason for implementing this, one, it is in the CMP, but secondly, it's not Kahuku Mauna that wants to regulate other Native Hawaiian cultural practices, but it was a means to, we're not stopping, it's not stopping individuals from exercising their traditional cultural practices, but it was a means to provide a mechanism for them to do so, but also to incorporate some of the rules and regulations that exist. And Kahuku Mauna was cognizant that we are subject to compliance with these rules and regulations. And so there's a balance here. It's not stopping. We're not telling you can't do it, but we would like to be able to work with you on how and where you would like to place your particular cultural feature.
So you say it's not stopping, but if I am a spiritual practitioner whose practice is to make an offering on a shrine and to leave that offering to deteriorate deliberately as an expression of my connection to the life and death cycle of the planet. You are telling me you will take that offering off the altar as soon as I finish my ceremony, are you not?
No, I think it's for health and safety reasons we would do it.
No, but let me interrupt.
Yeah.
Not the reasons you would do it, what you're actually doing. If you say to me as a spiritual practitioner that those offerings I have placed on the shrine will not be allowed to deteriorate to express my connection to the life and death cycle of the planet, they will be removed as soon as I leave, then you are stopping my spiritual practice, are you not?
No objection. If he's not going to let the witness testify and answer the question.
The witness's answers.
He's just arguing with the witness.
The witness's answers were not responsive. She was telling me reasons why they do it. I wasn't asking reasons why they do it.
Yes, I agree. Overruled. Please re-ask your question.
If I, as a spiritual practitioner under the protocols you're talking about, place an offering on a shrine, and my practice is to leave that offering and allow it to deteriorate as part of my expressing my connection to the life and death cycle of the planet, the Office of Mauna Kea Management has a rule that says those offerings have to be removed as soon as my ceremony is complete. Is that not true?
The policy doesn't say that it would be removed immediately.
It doesn't say that as soon as the ceremony is complete?
Oh, sorry. What are we on now? Are we talking about CR5 or CR7?
We're dealing with CR7. I'm sorry, CR5. We're dealing with CR5. Yeah, we were also looking at table 4-7 from the exhibit A11.
So, okay, so the policy, so CR table 4-7 was the management actions that was recommended in the Cultural Resources Management Plan. What the Kahuku Mauna Council did was they considered many things, but the policy that they ended up with does not say immediate removal following a ceremony.
Okay, let's try it this way. Let's go back to Exhibit L17, CR5, and look at page 2 and the third item, which says food offerings shall be removed immediately following the ceremony. You see that?
CR5.
CR5, which is Exhibit L17,
right,
on page 2, item 3.
Are we looking at this under, is it under the Natural Area Reserve?
No, it's at the top of the page.
Okay.
Top of the page.
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay. This is actually what it is. It's taken from the Cultural Resources Management Plan, and what this section is just a providing some background information that are provided by other rules, regulations, and plans. But that did not end up, the removal following a ceremony did not, the immediate removal did not end up in their final policy.
So you're saying that on page 6 of L17, that none of those 3 points in the proposed policy could be used to require the immediate removal of offerings from a shrine as soon as the ceremony is complete?
If there's a health and safety reason, they would be removed.
Other than health and safety?
Yes. Yes. For immediate removal? Are we talking about immediate removal?
Immediate, well, Removal as soon as the ceremony is complete. Is that included anywhere in the proposed policy on page 6?
It does not say immediate removal.
Do any of the provisions offered in that proposed policy cover the possibility of requiring immediate removal after a ceremony is complete?
Yes, for health and safety reasons.
Only.
It's for health and safety reasons, yes.
Only for health and safety reasons.
Well, if it depends. If there's food items that could attract vermin, for example, then we would have to consider removing it.
Thank you.
And that is a health and safety reason.
Does the Office of Mauna Kea Management have the authority to regulate the traditional and customary practices of Native Hawaiians?
Does the Office of Mauna Kea Management what?
Have the authority to regulate the traditional and customary practices of Native Hawaiians?
We have an, I think for us it's about managing and balancing between the exercise of cultural practices with the protection of the natural resources, the compliance with existing rules and regulations that would come into play as to how we would manage or actually work with Native Hawaiians on some of these issues.
Does the Office of Mauna Kea Management have the authority to require a spiritual practitioner to secure a permit from DLNR in order to construct an altar on Mauna Kea?
It's the compliance of a DLNR rule.
Does the Office of Mauna Kea Management have the authority to require a spiritual practitioner to secure a permit from DLNR in order to construct an altar on Mauna Kea?
For us, it would be a compliance of a DLNR rule.
I'm not quite following your answer here. You have the authority to require a permit or you don't? I'm a spiritual practitioner. I come to you, Stephanie Nagata. I say, I want to build an altar on Mauna Kea. Do you have the authority to say yes or no?
We would have to go to DLNR to ask them for whether or not they would require a permit or whatever kind of site plan approval or whatever it is for this particular feature.
So in your view, the DLNR has the authority to require a spiritual practitioner to get a permit?
DLNR would have the control of this process if it's a land use activity, yes.
They could require a permit.
They could.
Does the permit requirement apply to standing a single rock upright?
I believe it's a part of the definition of a land use.
Standing a rock upright is a land use that's regulated by DLNR.
Well, it would be DLNR's interpretation, yes.
Does the permit requirement apply to standing multiple rocks upright?
That would be a DLNR interpretation.
According to Hawaii Administrative Rules 13-5-31, permit applications is the title. And the provision says, applications for all permits and approvals provided for in this chapter shall be submitted to the department on the form prescribed by the department. Are you aware of that provision?
Not verbatim, but
do you know if there is a form available from DLNR to apply for a permit to build an altar?
there is a form for a land use application.
And does that form define the building of an altar as a land use?
Not specifically.
And do you consider the building of a form of a shrine, an altar, an ahu, a shrine on the mountain, to be a land use under the relevant regulations?
I would object to, again, asking the witness for any any legal conclusion or opinion?
Mr. Singh?
Well, this witness has testified extensively the previous hearing date and today that they are involved in the process of determining who gets a permit and who doesn't to build an altar. And so,
are you asking her to express a legal opinion?
no.
Well, then maybe you can qualify your question.
As you understand the DLNR regulation of land uses on the mountain, does DLNR have a form that I can file as a spiritual practitioner requesting to build a shrine?
Yes.
And that form is what?
I'm not sure the name of the form, but there's a form.
Have you ever participated in a process where that form was filled out for the construction of an altar?
No.
Are you aware of any time at which DLNR has granted any permits for the construction of an altar?
Objection, calling for speculation on the part of this witness. She can't speak or answer questions on behalf of all of them. DLNR.
I think my question was whether she's aware of any time that DLNR has required a permit for a shrine. That was my question.
In her capacity as the OMKM director.
In her capacity as the OMKM director, we can limit it to that.
Go ahead.
Are you aware of any time that DLNR has required a permit for the building of a shrine on Mauna Kea?
I am not aware of it.
There was at one time in some of the materials I looked at a CR6. And CR6 was to develop and adopt guidelines for the visitation and use of ancient shrines, but that item was not on the agenda for that October 4th meeting. My only question to you is, what was the purpose of that item and why wasn't it on the agenda? Do you know the item I'm referring to, CR6?
Was it a visitation of ancient shrines?
Yes, exactly.
It was taken before the Mauna Kea Management Board in a previous meeting. It was taken to the Management Board
In the previous meeting?
Yes.
And did they approve it for recommendation to DLNR, or how does that process go?
It's a policy, and the Kahuku Mauna had come up with the policy, and the Mauna Kea Management Board approved it.
So let me just clarify. The Mauna Kea Management Board, you say approved it. They're an advisory board, are they not? So they don't really have authority to approve or disapprove anything, do they?
For projects, they can approve certain types of projects, those with minimal impact. Anything minor or major goes up to either the chancellor or to the president of Board of Regents.
So the adoption of guidelines for the visitation and use of ancient shrines would be within their purview to decide yes or no?
It was something that we felt that the Mauna Kea Management Board should review and approve.
At the October 4th, 2016 meeting, agenda items CR5, CR7, CR8, and CR9 were all referred back to Kahuku Mauna. Is that correct?
Correct.
Was part of the reason for referring the items back to Kahuku Mauna that the Temple of Lono filed suit the day before the meeting in question challenging this constitutionality of the proposed regulations? Was that part of the reason for referring it back to Kahuku Mauna?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. If the proposals offered on that day had been approved for recommendation or whatever, what would be the next step? Where would those proposals go?
Well, Kahuku Mauna had done a consultation with the Native Hawaiian community. They had scheduled a consultation session in May. They did have one. They had invited certain individuals from the community to come and to get their opinion about some of these CRs, as they're called. And the Mauna Kea Management Board had requested Kahukumana to, because there were some concerns expressed at the meeting, that they had recommended to Kahukumana to do a little bit more consultation.
Okay, my question was a little bit different. I appreciate that clarification. My question was a little different. What if they had approved what was on the agenda on October 4th? What would be the next step? Where would those approvals or recommendations go?
Well, then it would just be a step within the CMP that these CRs were reviewed, put forth by Kahukumana, and that the Mauna Kea Management Board agreed with it or disagreed with it.
And that would be the end of it?
Correct.
It wouldn't go beyond Office of Mauna Kea Management?
That's correct.
Okay. You were present during Judge Heen's testimony, is that correct?
Yes, I was.
Did you read his prepared testimony?
No, I did not.
In his testimony, Judge Heen identified the primary purposes for the establishment of the Office of Mauna Kea Management. Please tell me if you agree that these were the primary purposes for the establishment of the Office of Mauna Kea Management. An insistent demand coming from the public hearings for Hawaii Island-based oversight of observatory development.
I'm sorry, what was the first part?
An insistent demand coming from the public hearings for Hawaii Island-based oversight of observatory development. Is that your understanding as one of the reasons for the creation of the Office of Mauna Kea Management?
More or less, yes.
Okay, more what and less what?
I'm not exactly sure what he really, what he said, but it was the result of the community feeling that the management of the mountain should be island-based.
Island-based,
yes.
Thank you. And ensuring Native Hawaiians have unrestricted access to Mauna Kea, was that another purpose?
Yes.
And protecting Native Hawaiians' access to Mauna Kea for observing and practicing their ancient customs, traditions, and religious ceremonies, was that another purpose?
Access for Native Hawaiians in the exercise of their cultural practices, yes.
And to protect the natural environment within the Science Reserve?
Yes.
Right. Were there any other purposes that you thought were fundamental to the founding of that office?
Also to provide the community input, with having be island-based, that there would be, it would also be community-based, and so the community would have input into the management of the mountain.
Judge Heen also testified that his primary challenge was dealing with the observatories because they were acting as if they owned the mountain rather than being lessees. Do you remember him testifying to that?
Vaguely.
Did you find that to be part of the challenge when you first took your position at Office of Mauna Kea Management?
Well, having come from not knowing the real history of how the master plan came about, the appearance was that the astronomy community was had a large say in what was happening on the mountain.
At the time the Office of Mauna Kea Management was being formed, was there a similar concern that Native Hawaiian cultural and spiritual practitioners needed to be brought under control or regulated in some fashion?
No.
Prior to the arrival of Captain Cook, did a Hawaiian wishing to construct a shrine on Mauna Kea need to have permission from someone else in order to do so?
Argumentative.
Now, I don't mean to be argumentative, Your Honor. I'm simply highlighting the historical transition from a time when Native Hawaiians were fully free to have complete access to the mountain, build their shrines, didn't have to ask anyone's permission, to today, where we're hearing a very different regulatory scheme being imposed on the mountain.
Judge, it's argument.
It is argument, but in addition, it doesn't set the foundation. You haven't set the foundation to ask this witness that question.
Ah, okay. Are you aware of any regulatory scheme that existed prior to this one we're discussing today that would have required someone wishing to build an altar on Mauna Kea to have a permit or permission from someone else?
Well, I think within the traditional Hawaiian political and cultural structure, they probably had their rules and regulations as to how and when you can do certain kinds of activities.
Such as building a shrine?
I don't know.
Do you have a spiritual practice?
No, I don't.
Okay. Do you believe that Native Hawaiians engaged in their traditional spiritual practices that involve treating the earth as a god are engaged in paganism? Paganism?
Objection. Vague and ambiguous. Paganism.
As she understands the term.
Do you understand the question?
No, I don't.
Okay. You have testified that Ed Stevens was one of the initial founders of Kahuku-Mauna. Is that correct?
He's one of the original members of
One of the original
Kahuku-Mauna.
members. I'm going to distribute Exhibit A48, page 3. Which is part of the management plan, and on page 3 is titled Plan Setting Values and Voices.
She's going to need one too. Do you have an extra copy? Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm getting a cramp in my foot. If you just give me a second here. Much better. No, I'm good. There's some water, actually. Thank you. So on page 3 of Exhibit A48, there's a quote down in the bottom right-hand corner from Mr. Ed Stevens. Do you see that quote? This was the best I could get the print.
It's pretty tiny.
Pretty tiny, I know. Can you read it? Let me read it and you tell me if it fits what you see there. All islands have their sacred places. Mauna Kea is our legendary place. The summit was too sacred for the workings of man. It was a burial site for only the most special personages of the past. Does that comport with what you see on that page?
Yes.
Did Mr. Stevens ever express similar views to you?
He had a, yes.
Thank you. On page 5, which is part of that same document of A48, there's a list of commitments required of the University of Hawaii. And under those commitments, it says, a commitment to unrestricted religious and cultural practices in the Mauna Kea Science Reserve. You see that?
Yes.
As an entity created by the university and with management responsibilities delegated by the university, does this commitment apply to the Office of Mauna Kea Management as well?
Yes.
On that same page, there are 2 themes identified as underlying the management plan. The first theme is manage access, which is defined as policies and protocols to manage access while still providing the unrestricted while still providing unrestricted religious and cultural practices. When the Office of Mauna Kea Management addresses the management of access, is there a commitment that such management will not restrict religious and cultural practices?
Yes, subject to health and safety reasons and compliance with existing rules and regulations.
Would it be fair to say that one major purpose of the management plan was to restrict and control development, particularly observatories?
Could you repeat that, please?
Would it be fair to say that one major purpose of the management plan was to restrict and control development, particularly of observatories?
One of the major purposes of the master plan was to guide the development of observatories.
On page 6 of A48, various challenges are identified, including one titled Intrusion, which is defined as spiritual and sacred places are considered threatened by elements of the plan. Policies and protocols need to assure maximum respect and protection, unquote. Also identified as a challenge is one titled Trust and Healing, which is explained as, quote, the planning process raised understanding but equally raised fears and suspicions among many Native Hawaiians. This requires continued communication, education, and relationship building. Would it be fair to say that the master plan itself caused objections and concerns from Native Hawaiians?
There are various opinions on the master plan.
And were some of those opinions from Native Hawaiians critical of the plan?
You know, I was not there when this master plan was developed or approved. Yeah.
Your Honor, I'm going to distribute from the Mauna Kea plan 2 pages from the executive summary, page ES-2 and ES-3.
Before you do that, about how much more do you think you might have?
I'm just getting warmed up.
I'm asking you a serious question.
And I actually gave you a relatively serious answer. I would say to do everything I have here would take about an hour and a half. And I would also say that I believe I've been very succinct and productive and not duplicative or in any way delayed this proceeding.
I agree.
Thank you.
I'm going to take a recess at this time, 10 minutes.
Okay. I'm going to distribute page ES-2 of the Mauna Kea Management Policy Guidelines.
Thank you. Do you have another copy for her? Are you sure?
On page ES-2, there's a section titled Management Policy Guidelines. Do you see that?
Yes.
Could you please read the last sentence of that section?
There would be no restrictions on religious worship.
Thank you. I'm going to distribute page ES-3, the next page. On page ES-3, there's a section titled Archaeology and Culture. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
Would you please read the 5th bulleted entry that begins modern cultural practitioners?
Modern cultural practitioners would have unrestricted access.
Thank you. And I have a document which we've marked as Exhibit L21, and I'm not exactly sure where this comes from, to tell you the truth, but I'm hoping that the witness can identify where it comes from. The document is Kahuku-Mauna Council Guidelines, amended August 13th, 2013.
May I give it to Council? Mr. Singh, can I have you can have my copy.
Okay.
Sure.
Are you familiar? Are you familiar with this document?
Yes, I am.
Is this the current guidelines, or have they been amended since August of 2013?
I think this is their current one.
On page 6 of this document, there's a list. Actually, the title of it is on page 5, and the title is General Duties. And then on page 6, there are a series of entries. Do you see those?
Yes, I do.
Item B, no, let me back up for a second. Is there anywhere in these guidelines that you would find a general duty of Kahuku-Mauna to define what constitutes an appropriate spiritual practice?
No, I do not.
Thank you. Item B identifies as a duty to recommend rules and regulations, rules and guidelines for the proper protection, preservation, and enhancement of traditional and customary practices and for the overall cultural integrity of Mauna Kea. Do you consider requiring the removal of offerings immediately after the offering ceremony to be a rule that would protect, preserve, or enhance the traditional and customary practices of making offerings? I didn't hear an answer.
Yeah, it takes me a while to think.
Okay.
If it was removed for health and safety reasons, yes.
Okay. On or about July 1st, 2015, did the Office of Mauna Kea Management issue rules governing spiritual practices on Mauna Kea?
I don't believe so.
Okay. In earlier testimony, you were asked about these rules, and you referred to it as an accommodation that was being made for spiritual practitioners to go up on the mountain. Do you remember that testimony?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So I'm using the word rules. You would probably call them accommodations. Let me just grant that when I use the word rules, you may not think of them as rules, okay? But it's the word I use. So I will use that in my questions. Did you issue? Well, let me lay a little foundation here. What I'm referring to as rules were requirements that said no more than 10 people could go up at one time, that you had to be there at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, that a ranger had to go up with you. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
So did you issue those requirements?
No, those were protocols, requirements, as you call them, were discussed between the rangers and those who wanted to access the mountains, those who were primarily encamped down across from the visitor information station. They came up together with times and a number of people, because the ranger can't take, it would have been difficult for a ranger to take more than 10 people.
So you did not participate in the discussions of these creation of these rules?
No.
Did the rangers inform you about their discussions with the protectors?
They informed me that they had these discussions with the individuals who were down there at the Viz, that this is what they had come up, mutually had agreed upon.
And did you submit those requirements to anybody else for review and approval?
They are not rules. They were a means of how the rangers could accommodate these individuals who wanted to access the summit.
But isn't it BLNR that controls decisions affecting Native Hawaiian traditional and customary practices on the mountain? Let me ask a preliminary question. Let's take a look at what the rules were, or the requirements, whatever. Those who wish to go up the mountain to engage in spiritual practice had to be present at 1 o'clock p.m. at the 9,000-foot level. Are you aware of that?
This, again, was what had been agreed upon between the rangers and the individuals who were occupying the area across from the visitor information, that this is the time that they would want to go up at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. If others had come up, the rangers would make accommodations to them, provided that a ranger was available.
Are you aware that if you arrived after 1 o'clock p.m., you could be told you couldn't go up because you were late?
I believe when individuals had come up after that hour, that they were told that another group had been up there and that they would be able to try to accommodate them when the other group came back down.
And you're aware that it was limited to groups of 10 or less?
I'm not exactly sure of the size, but I think that sounds familiar.
And those going up the mountain to engage in spiritual practices had to be accompanied by a ranger. Is that correct?
For safety reasons.
And the ranger was to remain throughout the spiritual practice, even if the practice was considered private by the practitioner.
I don't believe the ranger participated with this group.
I didn't say participated. Remained present.
I'm not sure exactly where they were.
And that those going up could only stay for 1 hour.
I believe they stayed for more than an hour.
All right, let me back up. When you say, I believe they stayed for more than an hour, who is the they you're referring to?
The individuals who wanted to access the summit.
And when did they stay for longer than an hour?
This is what was reported to me by the rangers, although I think they had discussed that they would go up for an hour. Oftentimes it would take them more than an hour.
And part of the reason for this need for accommodation was the fact that the road was closed?
The road was closed because it was considered unsafe.
And it was considered unsafe because rocks had been placed in the road a few days earlier?
It was considered unsafe because the slopes had become destabilized because rocks were removed from the slopes when they were put into the middle of the road.
And were those slopes later stabilized?
There was an assessment made by Mauna Kea Support Services regarding the condition of the road.
And what did that assessment conclude?
They actually would traverse the road, look at the slopes, determine whether or not they were stable.
And what did they conclude?
So after a period of time, they felt that it was stable and they opened the road.
Did they do any construction, repair, or other work on the road?
They did some maintenance work while the road was closed.
Did that maintenance work directly relate to whether the road was stable or not?
Well, as part of their assessment, at the same time, they needed to do some repair to the road.
So that was repair they would have done regardless of what had happened. It was repair that was needed for the road.
Well, you know, you'd have, I don't know all the specifics of that. That's the Mauna Kea Support Services action.
During that time, were astronomers allowed to go up without restriction?
I believe the astronomers were able to go up, yes.
And during that time, these requirements were in place. Was the road up the summit open to water trucks without restriction?
I don't remember.
Was it open to nitrogen delivery trucks without restriction?
That I don't remember.
Are you aware that the rangers relied upon the protectors to tell them who was a legitimate spiritual practitioner entitled to go up on the mountain?
I don't know.
Are you aware that the protectors explained to the rangers that it was not appropriate for the protectors to make such a determination?
I don't know.
After the issuance of the rules in question, did the Temple of Lono file suit naming various people in their official capacities on the Office of Mauna Kea Management Board, challenging these particular rules? I'm asking if she's aware that the suit was filed.
On the lawsuit from the Temple of Lono?
Document 135 in the record of this proceeding is an opposition to the Temple of Lono motion for a partial summary judgment filed by the University of Hawaii. In that opposition, the University of Hawaii has attached as an exhibit the complaint I'm referring to and the memorandum in support of the summary judgment motion, which both include all of these provisions as being challenged as unconstitutional infringement on the religious rights of Native Hawaiians.
So your offer of proof is?
It's in the record already.
So where are you going with this witness and that information?
Whether she is aware that the suit was filed and what actions were taken after that suit was filed.
And why is this relevant?
Because the answer to the question that I haven't asked yet
That's what we're asking
is that after the filing of the suit, these rules were removed by the Office of Mauna Kea Management.
I think she answered that. She said, when you asked her, when the cross-examiner asked her whether or not the lawsuit was a cause for the withdrawal of the rules, she says no. Her answer was no.
No, you're mixing apples and oranges. I'm sorry, Mr. Louis Kwan.
I'm going to overrule the objection and allow you to ask it. Can
Okay.
we get there?
I'll ask it again. Are you aware that a lawsuit was filed by the Temple of Lono challenging these rules, requirements, whatever we want to call them, in the federal court that named members of, at least one member of the Office of Mauna Kea Management Board as a defendant?
Vaguely, yes.
Do you remember that the suit provided a declaration from a protector on the mountain that as many as 50 vehicles had gone up the mountain while the protectors or other spiritual practitioners were limited to one-time access for 10 people?
I'm not aware of what the content of that suit was.
Is it your testimony that the protectors of the mountain and the rangers agreed that that giving access at 1 o'clock in the afternoon covered all spiritual practitioners' needs in terms of accessing the mountain?
I believe I said that this was discussed between the rangers and those who were encamped across the visitor information station, as that would be a time that they would want to go. They have agreed upon. If other individuals had wanted to come, accommodations would be made for those individuals, provided that a ranger was available.
And after the lawsuit was filed, did the Office of Mauna Kea Management or the Rangers or whoever withdraw those requirements for people to go up?
I don't know.
I know you've been asked about the closing of the bathrooms, and I just have a couple of questions on that. I don't want to spend a lot of time dealing with it. I'm going to distribute a photo of a sign that was posted at the 9,000-foot level addressing the closing of the toilet facilities. Are you familiar with this sign?
No, I am not.
Did you ever have any discussions about posting a sign to alert people not to use the terrain around the closed bathrooms as a bathroom?
I do not. No, I don't.
So you never discussed putting up any such signs or approval of such signs?
I understand that Mauna Kea Support Services had wanted to inform individuals.
Well, let me just check the facts of this sign to see if you remember those. You remember that the bathrooms were closed, is that correct?
The visitor information station was closed, yes.
And was that area under video surveillance?
I don't know.
When the bathrooms were closed at the Haleopohaku level, were the only available bathrooms at the bottom of the access road at the Hunter's check-in station across from the access road?
There's restrooms at the county park. There are restrooms further up on the summit.
So if the road is closed and a visitor comes to the 9,000-foot level and finds that the bathrooms are closed, you're saying they could go up the summit to another bathroom?
They could.
Visitors were allowed to use the closed road?
Not during when the road was closed, no.
Right. At one point, when the roads were closed and people were using the surrounding area as a bathroom, there were people out actually scooping up human feces. Are you aware of that?
I believe Mauna Kea Support Services were doing that.
You already have page ES1 of Exhibit A48. Is that, you see that? You have that in front of you?
I'm sorry, what was that? ES1?
Oh, I'm sorry. I think you have 2 and 3. I have 1. I'm going to distribute 1. On page on page ES1, of Exhibit A48 at the bottom. It refers to a new management organization. Is that reference to the Office of Mauna Kea Management?
I believe so.
According to the master plan, that new organization is intended to provide a single point of contact on the island of Hawaii for matters related to the management of Mauna Kea. Is that correct?
That's what it says.
So you were asked earlier about the relationship of the Mauna Kea Support Services, which I will refer to as MKSS, and the Office of Mauna Kea Management, and I want to clarify that relationship. The Office of Mauna Kea Management is charged with the day-to-day management of the Mauna Kea Science Reserve, mid-level support facilities at Halepohaku, and the Summit Access Road. Is that correct?
Correct.
Does the term mid-level support facilities at Halepohaku refer to the visitor center?
It's one of the facilities.
So it's included in the mid-level support
Correct.
facilities. So the website of MKSS and the Office of Mauna Kea Management both state that the MKSS is a service organization that operates under the direction of the Mauna Kea Observatory's Oversight Committee. What is the Mauna Kea Observatory's Oversight Committee?
Are you reading from something?
This is from the website of the Office of Mauna Kea Management. Let me see if I have that reference. Yeah, I can show you the page of the website. So on that page of the website, down near the bottom, it says that the Mauna Kea Support Services is a service organization that operates under the direction of the Mauna Kea Observatory's Oversight Committee. And my question is, what is the Mauna Kea Observatory's Oversight Committee?
It is made up of representatives from the observatories.
How does that committee provide direction to the Mauna Kea Support Services?
Well, Mauna Kea Support Services provides a lot of logistical and other support for the observatories.
Under the direction of the Mauna Kea Observatory's Oversight Committee. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is the Office of Mauna Kea Management a member of the Oversight Committee?
No, we are not.
Does the Oversight Committee have a staff of its own?
The director and the manager.
A single person that's a manager of the Oversight?
He reports to the Oversight Committee.
And what, I'm a little confused. Who is the manager?
Stuart Hunter.
So Stuart Hunter is the director of the Office of the Mauna Kea Support Services.
He's the manager.
He's the manager. And he reports to the Oversight Committee.
Correct.
Who funds the work of the Oversight Committee?
Well, the committee itself is not funded.
Not funded. Thank you. So what is the relationship of the Oversight Committee to the Office of Mauna Kea Management?
They come to us when they have some kind of project or issue that requires the office to review.
Can you give me an example?
For example, putting up guardrails on the Summit Access Road.
So if the Oversight Committee wanted to put up guardrails on the access road, would they use the Mauna Kea Support Services to do that?
If it's, yes, because Mauna Kea Support Services is responsible for maintaining the road.
The road. And Mauna Kea Support Services provides logistical support services to all of the Mauna Kea observatories? Is that correct?
I believe so.
And do you know the nature of that logistical support? What do they do for the observatories?
They manage the mid-level facilities. They maintain the road. They do snow removal.
So in the work that the Mauna Kea Support Services does in operating and maintaining the mid-level support facilities, mid-level facilities at Halepohaku, is that work performed pursuant to a contract?
I don't know.
So who pays Mauna Kea Support Services for operating and maintaining the mid-level support facilities?
The observatories contribute to it.
The observatories can pay the Mauna Kea Support Services for that service.
They contribute funds to it.
Is that through the Oversight Committee or separately?
No, I believe it's just from the observatories to Mauna Kea Support Services.
And so, but you don't know if Mauna Kea Support Services is operating under a contract with anybody?
I'm sure there's some kind of agreement between the observatories, and I honestly don't know all the logistics of that.
So you testified that Mr. Hunter at Mauna Kea Support Services made the decision to close the bathrooms. Is that correct?
Correct.
If you had disagreed with that decision, did you have the authority to reverse Mr. Hunter's decision?
No, the visitor information station comes under Mauna Kea Support Services.
If you had disagreed with Mr. Hunter's decision to close the bathrooms, was there anywhere you could go to have that decision changed?
We would just discuss it with Mr. Hunter.
But I mean, if you thought it was a mistake and Mr. Hunter disagreed, is there some higher authority to which you could take your concerns?
No, we would just go to Mr. Hunter.
If the Mauna Kea Support Services were providing support to the Mauna Kea Ranger Program, which the Office of Mauna Kea Management decided was unnecessary or inappropriate or no longer needed, would you have the authorities to direct the Office of the Mauna Kea Support Services to stop delivering those services?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that again?
Right. If the Mauna Kea Support Services are providing certain services to the Ranger Program, and in your review of that, you decided there was no longer a need for those services, would you be authorized to cancel those services?
They provide us with administrative support. We could, yes.
Would you? I'm sorry.
Yes,
would you repeat that?
They could.
They could. You could.
Mm-hmm.
The Mauna Kea Support Services is described as a direct project of the Research Corporation of the University of Hawaii. What is the Research Corporation of the University of Hawaii?
I don't know its official term. I mean, it's an organization that is used by the university as well as organizations for where extramural funds are deposited and utilized.
And what kind of funds were those?
Extramural.
What's an extramural fund?
Monies from not from the university directly.
So the Research Corporation of the University of Hawaii gets money separate from the university, like in grants or whatever.
Correct.
And they then fund Mauna Kea support services?
The observatories the observatories provide funding through RCUH to run Mauna Kea support services.
What is the relationship between the Institute for Astronomy and the Mauna Kea support services?
Institute for Astronomy is the PI for the program.
I'm sorry, the PI?
Principal Investigator.
Thank you.
For the program that comes under RCUH, the Research Corporation.
And does the Institute for Astronomy have any relationship to the Visitor Center?
Not directly.
Indirectly?
Yes.
And how so indirectly?
They help to provide some funds for the operations of the Viz.
If the master lease expires in 2033, the university will have no authority over the lands currently leased. Is that correct?
Objection. Calling for legal opinion. Are you asking her personally for her personal opinion?
Excuse me?
Just qualify it.
Okay. As director of the Office of Mauna Kea Management, have you ever become aware that the master lease is going to expire in 2033?
The current master lease, yes.
And do you know what the impact on the Office of Mauna Kea Management would be if that lease expired?
Then the university would not have a presence on the mountain.
And the Office of Mauna Kea Management would not have a presence on the mountain?
That's correct.
Have you participated in any discussions about that possibility?
In what? I don't know. The possibility of what?
The possibility that the lease would expire in 2033 and the Office of Mauna Kea Management would be demobilized, if you will.
Well, we never really know.
Okay. Not something you want to think about, I understand. During the break, you were having discussions with Mr. Louis Kwan. Can you tell me what those discussions were about?
He's just telling me to keep my cool.
Keep your cool. I'm sorry, was I causing you to lose your cool? If I was, I apologize. Anything else you all discussed?
No.
Okay. There is a commitment on the part of the university to decommission 3 telescopes prior to the completion of the 30-meter telescope. Are you aware of that?
Can you be more specific?
Well, the governor and the chair of the Board of Land and Natural Resources and others have all agreed that 3 telescopes will be decommissioned before the 30-meter telescope is finished. Are you aware of that agreement?
I'm aware of the governor's 10-point plan, yes.
And are you part of discussions on how the decommissioning of those 3 telescopes would take place?
We would be responsible for carrying out the decommissioning process.
And are you involved in that discussion now, or is that something that's going to happen later?
With the one telescope, the CSO has filed its notice of intent to decommission.
And what has the Office of Mauna Kea Management done in response?
We're waiting for CSO to come forward with their plan.
So it's at the very beginning stage?
That's correct.
And the other 2, there's been nothing submitted yet in terms of a notice of intent?
Notice of intent was filed for the Hokukea telescope, the UH Hilo educational telescope.
And has anything happened with that other than the notice of intent being filed?
Notice of intent has been filed, and the Mauna Kea Management Board had requested that the university have a little bit more review of this project, of this request.
Along what lines was additional review recommended?
To talk, well, there were some individuals within the Hawaiian community that came forward and said that they did not agree with the decommissioning of Hoku'ea.
And would that be Pueo?
I don't think it was Pueo, it was members from the community.
Members from the community.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to ask you a question that I know is going to sound argumentative or hostile, but I really am looking for your thoughts on this. The Office of Mauna Kea Management was established in 2000.
Correct.
In 2010, there was an environmental impact statement prepared for the 30-meter telescope. And in that environmental impact statement, they made a finding that from a cumulative perspective, the impact on cultural resources has been and would continue to be substantial, adverse, and significant. Are you aware of that finding in the EIS?
You know, this is cumulative objection. It's something that's...
I haven't asked my question yet. Go ahead.
Your question was, are you aware of the finding?
Finding.
Go ahead.
Are you aware of that finding?
No, you asked the question. He's making the objection.
Oh, okay.
You know, we've gone over the same topic time and again with other witnesses too. I think Jim Hayes went through it extensively during the hearings, and it's cumulative. And she had no responsibility in actually putting together the EIS. We had the preparer of the EIS was questioned by Mr. Sakin and others about whether or not this about the cumulative impacts itself.
Mr. Sinkin?
Let me tell you the question I want to ask her, and then that'll help. What I really want to ask her is, given that the Office of Mauna Kea Management was formed in the year 2000, and 10 years later, the assessment made is that there have been significant adverse and substantial impacts on cultural practices, and that nothing has really changed in terms of that assessment since 2010. What are her thoughts about why the Office of Mauna Kea Management, given all the responsibilities and authorities they were given, why they didn't prevent the impacts from being significant, adverse, and et cetera? What could have been changed? What would she even recommend be changed so that they could be more effective?
I'll allow you to ask the question. Go ahead.
Did you understand the question?
Can you please repeat the question?
Yeah. Is your microphone on?
Could you please repeat the question?
Yes, I certainly can. So the Office of Mauna Kea Management was founded in the year 2000. And in the year 2010, there was an environmental impact statement prepared for the 30-meter telescope that found that the impacts on cultural resources were substantial, adverse, and significant in 2010. So by that time, the Office of Mauna Kea Management had been in place for 10 years. We're now even further along the road, and I think we've heard plenty of testimony. I don't disagree. We've heard plenty of testimony that that's still the case, significant, adverse, and all that. So I'm kind of giving you an open-ended question that may give some guidance for the future. Is there anything more or different that could have been done to prevent this accumulation of adverse impacts?
I believe the condition of this cumulative impact existed before the office was established.
And did things get better after the office was established?
I believe so.
Okay. I want to go back for just a second to the very first exhibit we looked at, L16. I think that's right. Is that, you have that? The agenda?
The agenda, yes.
Yeah, okay. Down in the bottom of new business, here we go. In the bottom of new business, there's an item designated as I, capital I, that says action item, review and approval of draft administrative rules. You see that?
Yes.
So these are rules that have been under development for quite a while. Is that correct?
Correct.
And they're rules regarding public and commercial activities on the management lands on Mauna Kea. Is that correct?
Correct.
And do those rules involve setting protocols for spiritual practices?
No.
And the status of those rules is that they are now recommended by Office of Mauna Kea Management Board to DLNR?
No.
Or what is the status? I'm sorry.
The status is that it's been recommended for approval by the Mauna Kea Management Board to have these move forward in the rulemaking process to the university system.
You said it's been recommended for approval. So that the Board of Mauna Kea Management has recommended approval of this administrative...
to move the process forward with the rulemaking.
With the rulemaking.
Misstated objection. Misstating the testimony. Her testimony was the MKMB had moved it forward, not the Office of Mauna Kea Management.
I'm sorry, if I said the management board, management, I misspoke. It was the board that voted at that October 4th meeting.
Correct.
To send this forward. Thank you. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Thank you.